Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the creaky, candlelit world of Victorian Insomnia. It's damp. It's drafty. It smells like mothballs and coal smoke. And if you think your memory foam mattress is struggling, try getting 8 hours on a lumpy horsehair sack next to a fireplace that hisses like it's judging you. The curtains are thick enough to smother a secret, and the hallway clock insists on ticking just a little too loud. This is the age of steam, superstition, and sleep deprivation, dressed in a corset. You, of course, are right in the middle of it. You step quietly through a high-ceilinged bedroom, the wallpaper a repeating floral that seems to pulse in the low lamplight. Outside, a carriage wheel crunches gravel. Inside, your bed frame lets out a groan as old as empire. And you're tired, but not the kind of tired that leads to sleep. No, you're Victorian tired. The anxious, chest-tight, thought-looping kind. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with your city and what time it is right now. I love knowing who else is up this late with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You press your fingers to your temples and sink onto the edge of a bed that's more decorative than restful. The pillow smells faintly of lavender, mildew, and hair oil. Sleep, for the average Victorian, isn't a simple 8-hour stretch. You drift in and out, what they called segmented sleep. First sleep. Wake. Second sleep. It's normal to be up at 2 a.m., maybe to read by lamplight or mumble prayers about cholera. Your mattress creaks again. Somewhere in the house, a board settles with a groan that could be a ghost. You glance nervously at the fireplace. No flame tonight, only a hint of orange embers and a faint soot perfume. Victorian nights were long. Artificial light was scarce and expensive. A few candles, maybe a flickering oil lamp. The shadows are thick and alive, and your brain, free of distractions, starts producing intrusive thoughts like a punch card machine. What if the chimney catches fire? Did I lock the coal shed? Was that cough the beginning of something bad? And yet people crave sleep. They always have. You pull a woolen blanket over your legs, scratchy but warm. The Victorians feared the damage of sleeplessness, believing it could unhinge the mind, unmoor the soul, or let in things. You catch yourself eyeing the mirror across the room. Did it just shift? Historians still argue whether segmented sleep was a biological norm or a cultural adaptation. Some say our ancestors naturally dozed in phases. Others say the industrial clock shattered sleep like so much gaslight glass. But for now, you just lie there. Listening. Thinking. Not sleeping. There's no white noise machine. The hum of the city is replaced by the clang of horseshoes, maybe the moan of wind under the eaves. You try counting something, sheep maybe, but they all wear top hats and quote poetry. Unhelpful. You rub your eyes. In the corner sits a nightstand, upon which rests a devotional book and a glass of what could generously be called water, though you suspect it's rainwater and regret. Many Victorians kept a slop jar under the bed. You try not to think about it. You definitely don't use it. You shift again, pressing your face into the pillow. The feathers inside are unevenly distributed, like your thoughts. You wonder how Queen Victoria slept, if she slept. Probably on imported linens and monarchical worries. A strange comfort, knowing that even crowned heads tossed and turned. There's something about a night like this, still, but never quiet. 1,000 small sounds interrupting each other like a haunted orchestra tuning up. Your bedposts are carved with acanthus leaves and gilt. You remember being told never to hang wet laundry inside. It'll cause vapors. Whatever those are. The room is cold, of course. No central heating. Maybe a fire earlier, but now it's just residual warmth and heavy drapery. You consider wearing your day hat to bed just to feel safer. It's not like you'll sleep anyway. The fear of the night runs deep in this world. Illness strikes fastest at dusk. Spirits walk at midnight. And the boundary between dream and death is unsettlingly thin. It's no wonder sleep is treated like a ritual. There are prayers for sleep, special clothing for sleep, even specific beds for guests, children, invalids. You lie still, wondering whether sleep is something you do, or something that happens to you. You blink slowly. A clock chimes once. 1:30 something. Someone, somewhere, believed that feather pillows caused headaches. Others swore by them. Some even stuffed pillows with hops, yes, the same hops in beer, to induce calm. You try imagining a pillow filled with dried hops. Smells a bit like stale ale and lost hope. Insomnia is not new, but the way people handle it changes. In the Victorian age, they feared it. They fought it. They drank, bled, steamed, and prayed it away. You'll see. You'll see a lot. But for now, in this moment, in this creaky bed in the candlelit hush, you lie perfectly still. Tired. Awake. Human. The ceiling looms like a story yet unwritten. Maybe, just maybe, you'll fall asleep before morning. But probably not. You sit up slightly and reach for the brown glass bottle on the side table. Its label curls at the edges, ink smudged from damp fingers. Dr. Malvern's patent nerve tonic. Underneath, in fancier script, now with enhanced sedative qualities. You remove the cork, no childproof caps here, and sniff. Sweet, syrupy, a little like licorice and something faintly metallic. You hesitate, then take a sip. It burns just enough to make you feel alive, which is ironic, since it contains a mild dose of opium. This was standard practice. In fact, it was advertised. You glance toward the folded pamphlet that came with the bottle, complete with florid testimonials from people with names like Mrs. Tittlethorpe of Ipswich, who claimed she hadn't slept in years before Dr. Malvern opened the gates of night's mercy. It sounds noble until you realize it's just laudanum. Sugar, alcohol, morphine. Victorian bedtime in a bottle. Doctors, back then, weren't the white-coated figures of efficiency we imagine today. They were often tired themselves, overworked, undersanitized, and still figuring out germ theory. And when patients came in complaining they couldn't sleep, the answer was nearly always, sedate. Sedate the nerves, the muscles, the complaints. The Victorians adored tonics. Patent medicines lined the shelves of every apothecary. You were supposed to trust the elaborate label and never ask about ingredients. Historians still argue whether these concoctions were given in good faith or simply sold like snake oil. The truth probably lies somewhere between, a haze of hopeful chemistry and capitalist dreams. There was even a tonic made of radium for a brief, glowing moment. Yes, the radioactive element. It didn't help with sleep, but it made your bones feel interesting. You lie back, feeling the syrup trickle warmth down your throat. If it makes you drowsy, great. If it makes you hallucinate, well, that's not unusual. Many users of laudanum reported vivid dreams, floating down velvet staircases, visiting relatives long dead, riding horses made of fog. You blink slowly. Victorian insomnia wasn't just a matter of tossing and turning. It was believed to be a sign of a deeper disturbance. Nervous exhaustion. A spiritual misalignment. Overeducation. Seriously, women were warned that reading too many novels could lead to restlessness and hysteria. Your bookshelf beside the bed seems to smirk. You leaf through the small volume there, The Art of Sleep, a real pamphlet written in the 1870s by a man who definitely thought eating pickled onions after 7 p.m. was a reckless choice. According to the book, you should avoid meat, excitement, and strong light after dusk. You should never sleep near an open window, you might catch a miasma, nor too close to your spouse, you might catch a feeling. And still, people couldn't sleep. Hence the rise of night drugs, not just opium, but bromide salts, chloral hydrate, even ether. Sleep was something to be subdued, coaxed, tricked into submission. You try to imagine someone now advertising a drink that says proudly, "Now with extra morphine." But back then, it wasn't just acceptable, it was fashionable. There's a fringe case, you might have heard of her, Lady Caroline Montclar, who hosted midnight salons in London where the city's most tormented insomniacs would gather and sip custom elixirs while discussing poetry, ghosts, and the medicinal merits of absinthe. A sort of sleep-deprived book club, if you will. They claimed that sleeplessness made them wiser. Or at least weirder. You adjust the collar of your nightshirt. The syrup hums low in your blood now. You're not sure if you're sleepy or just heavily sedated. Your limbs feel syrupy, like they might slide off the bed and puddle under the rug. But your mind? Still racing. You think about work. About the sound in the chimney. About the bottle. How much is too much? The answer is, Victorian medicine didn't always know. Overdoses happened. A tragic number of infants, in fact, were accidentally given too much soothing syrup that contained morphine. It soothed them permanently. The bottles didn't have dosing instructions. They didn't need to. You were expected to figure it out. Or not. And still, the tonics kept selling. You roll onto your side, watching the shadows paint slow curves on the far wall. Some doctors advocated not for drugs, but for mindset. Willing the mind toward calmness, they called it. One surgeon even suggested counting the rhythm of your own heartbeat, unless you had heart trouble, in which case it was counterproductive. You press a hand to your chest. You feel the thump. Slow. But not slow enough. Of course, if you were wealthy enough, you could afford a personal doctor to administer your evening dose. He might arrive with a silver syringe and a warm smile, administer a little night milk, a combination of morphine and milk of magnesia, and gently whisper, "Sleep well, madam." Then, presumably, ride away on a horse that also had insomnia. There's something tragically charming about how much effort Victorians poured into unconsciousness. They built elaborate rituals, designed furniture just for napping, and still often woke feeling exactly as tired. But the bottle helped. Or at least convinced them it did. You feel the room bend slightly, not in a scary way, more like the wallpaper has decided to wave goodnight. One more sip, maybe? Just a small one. You reach again for the tonic, and this time the glass bottle clinks against your teeth. The taste is stronger now. Less sweet. The glow behind your eyes grows warmer, thicker. You let yourself sink into the bed, heavier now, your limbs stubborn but slow. Sleep? Not yet. But something close. Like floating. Somewhere in the house, the clock chimes again. It's probably still only midnight. The blanket you're under weighs a small ton. Not metaphorically. It's likely made of thick wool, perhaps a quilt on top, and beneath that, something even heavier. Maybe a counterpane your great-aunt stitched during a winter that lasted emotionally longer than it did meteorologically. The pressure is oddly reassuring. Like being pinned in place by tradition and insomnia at the same time. Victorians believed in bundling. The colder the house, and it was always cold, the more layers you added. Not just on the bed, but on yourself. You wore flannel nightshirts, perhaps buttoned all the way up to your chin, thick woolen socks, and if you were especially stylish, a nightcap. Yes, a literal hat. To bed. Because heat escapes through your head, they'd say. Also because it looked adorable, like a sleepy wizard just gave up halfway through a spell. You shift slightly under the covers, the weight settling around you like sediment. In the corner, a cast iron bed warmer sits unused tonight. It's a hollow pan on a long handle, designed to be filled with coals and slipped under the covers before bed. If you're lucky, it won't burn a hole in the sheets. Or your thigh. These objects feel bizarre now, like something from a Dickensian cosplay set. But they were nightly companions in a world where heat was precious, and sleep was often chased more than found. You imagine lighting a fire just for the privilege of half-warm feet. And the smell? Slightly smoky. A hint of singed flannel. Comforting in the way only slightly dangerous things can be. Historians still debate whether these layered rituals improved sleep or merely became part of the nightly performance. You weren't just going to bed, you were preparing for bed, with the same elaborate choreography used for theater or war. There's a fringe theory that Victorians feared night air, literally feared it. Open windows were believed to invite miasmas, dampness, bad humors. So the solution? Seal everything up. Stuff the cracks in your bedroom door with rags. Pull thick velvet curtains across the windows. Never mind the fact you might slowly suffocate in your own stale breath. That was healthy. You roll over and stare up at the ceiling. It's high, ornate, and painted in a pattern that looks like someone tried to count stars and gave up. A cobweb drifts gently in the corner, housing what you suspect is a spider who also can't sleep. Beside the bed, a hot water bottle wrapped in knitted fabric radiates residual warmth. If you were wealthier, you might have a ceramic one, porcelain, delicately painted, shaped like a pig. Yes, a pig. Because nothing says sleep well, like cuddling with heated livestock. You pull the covers higher, the air above the blanket noticeably colder. You breathe into the space near your chin to warm it, a trick passed down through generations of equally sleep-deprived relatives. The mattress beneath you is uneven, possibly stuffed with horsehair, possibly judging you. Every movement makes it squeak like an opinionated goose. Victorian beds were designed for posture and morality, not comfort. A straight spine reflected a straight soul. Cushy softness? That was decadence. Suspect. You think of the stiff mattress beneath you and imagine your spine slowly submitting to its will. Still, they tried to make bedtime beautiful. The bedposts are tall, crowned with carved finials shaped like pineapples, an old symbol of hospitality. Hanging from the canopy above, faded lace netting billows faintly. Not for bugs, really. Just for aesthetics. For gentility. Even if you're lying awake at 2:47 a.m., at least you're doing it in style. You adjust your position again, trying to find the sweet spot between warm enough to stay put and not so warm I start hallucinating about Victor Hugo pacing at the foot of the bed. There's a muffled sound, maybe the boiler settling, or a neighbor's cat misjudging a leap. You wonder, idly, what Victorians feared most in the night. Fire, certainly. Burglars, always. But more often, themselves. Their minds. The things that crept in when the gas lights went out. A runaway imagination was considered dangerous, especially for women. It could breed nervous conditions. Or worse, poetry. Of course, some people fought back with comfort. Weighted blankets, herbal sachets tucked under pillows, even sleep stones, warmed by the fire. These were literal rocks, heated and wrapped in cloth. You press your foot against something near the bottom of the bed and realize, yep, someone left a stone down there. It's still faintly warm. Like a secret from earlier in the evening, left just for you. One particularly odd remedy that floats back to your memory involves sleeping with a slice of raw onion near the bed. Supposedly, the scent soothed the nerves. You wrinkle your nose. That might explain why Aunt Gertie's bedroom always smelled like soup and sadness. You can't help but smile. Sleep is strange. It's never really guaranteed, no matter how many pillows you pile or blankets you bundle. But the rituals help. They give shape to the void. They make the darkness feel occupied. So you lie there, tangled in fabric, comforted by warmth and the quiet absurdity of bedtime layers. You think about all the things people have done, across time, to woo sleep closer, to coax it, trick it, bribe it. And sometimes, all you can do is dress the part. Wear the hat. Light the coals. Snuggle the pig. Outside, a light drizzle begins to tap against the windowpane. You close your eyes and listen to it for a while. Not sleeping yet. But maybe closer. You open your eyes to darkness and driftwood dreams. Not quite asleep, but not entirely here either. The air in the room has changed, cooler, heavier, as if the shadows have settled into their overnight poses. You shift again under the weight of quilts, and something creaks, not the bed this time, but the floorboard just beyond your reach. Probably nothing. Probably just the past stretching its limbs. In Victorian times, sleep wasn't always one long stretch of unconsciousness. In fact, many people didn't expect it to be. You've likely heard of it, segmented sleep. The first sleep, which lasted a few hours after dusk, followed by a waking period around midnight, and then a second sleep that carried you into morning. That in-between hour? That was prime time for prayer, letter writing, checking on the baby, or, if you're a little more modern, reconsidering all your life choices while staring at a flickering candle stub. Historians still argue whether this sleep pattern was biologically natural or simply a result of pre-electric lighting. Did we evolve to wake in the middle of the night? Or did the lack of Netflix just give people more time to notice it? Either way, Victorians embraced it. You could even set your watch by the muffled rustle of dressing gowns in hallways at 1:15 a.m. You sit up slowly, adjusting to the idea that maybe wakefulness isn't a failure, it's just the intermission. Some doctors of the day encouraged this nocturnal break. They said it offered the brain a chance to digest the day's impressions. There were even guidebooks that suggested optimal activities for the midnight hour. One such book advised reciting memorized poetry while sipping warm milk. Another recommended reading a Bible passage and gently massaging the temples with lavender oil. You rub your temples now, not with oil, but out of habit. The skin feels cool. The silence buzzes. The clock, ever the insomniac's nemesis, clicks quietly toward 2. A fringe practice during this midnight wakefulness involved correspondence. Yes, some people kept a night journal, where they'd record thoughts that only seemed to appear in the dark. Dreams. Regrets. Invented conversations with people they hadn't seen in years. These weren't just diary entries. They were emotional lifeboats cast into a sea of sleeplessness. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed. The floor is cold, so cold it feels like walking on old porcelain. You shuffle to the writing desk near the window, its surface bathed in moonlight. The drawer slides open with a reluctant groan, and you pull out a notebook. The cover is soft from handling, the pages slightly yellowed. You write a line, still not asleep. But I'm starting to accept it. There's a strange comfort in this hour. No obligations. No expectations. Just you, your thoughts, and the low rustle of a world that's momentarily paused. Some Victorians used this time to talk to their dead. You heard that right. Table rapping was all the rage, seances conducted in drawing rooms, sometimes even in bedrooms. You picture a woman in a bonnet, one hand on the bedpost, the other hovering over a table that begins to tremble. "Are you there, Uncle Horace?" she whispers. 3 raps equals yes. Was it sleep deprivation, or something more spiritual? Historians still debate it. You lean back in the chair and look out the window. The city, if you can call it that, is quiet. No cars. No hum of streetlights. Just fog curling in soft folds over chimney pots and empty cobblestones. A lone figure walks beneath a gas lamp, cloak drawn tight, hat tilted. You blink, and they're gone. Or maybe they never were. Your mind's own performance art. You light a small oil lamp on the desk, the flame flickering like a shy performer on a darkened stage. The warmth makes the shadows dance, and suddenly the room feels a bit smaller. A bit kinder. A popular belief at the time was that night brought revelations. People claimed they thought more clearly between sleeps. Some even said their most inspired ideas came at 3 a.m., and not all of them involved running away to sea. You smile at the thought. You yawn. A good one, full-bodied, a ripple from the soles of your feet to your scalp. Maybe the first real sign that sleep is circling again. You close the notebook and extinguish the lamp, slipping back into bed with that sacred hope, maybe second sleep will do the trick. The mattress greets you like an old friend. Lumpy, yes, but loyal. You try one of those breathing tricks. A slow inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale for 8. Victorian physicians wouldn't have known the numbers, but they did recommend drawing long, deliberate breaths to ease the nervous system. Something about oxygen purging impure thoughts. Or maybe that was just metaphor. You pull the quilt tighter and close your eyes. Somewhere beyond the window, a barn owl hoots once, like a punctuation mark in the night. A wind shift rattles the window latch. You imagine the whole world breathing with you. In. Out. In again. And with it, the sense that maybe you don't have to fear the waking hours. Maybe this break in sleep isn't a mistake. Maybe it's a space, a little hallway between dreams where thoughts are allowed to wander barefoot, trailing their dressing gowns, sipping imaginary tea. You're not quite sure when your breathing softens. You just know that the dark feels less sharp now. The stillness has become a blanket. And in this pause between sleeps, there is, at last, a kind of rest. You wake, not with a jolt, but with that quiet awareness that your body is still here, still horizontal, still wrapped like a human croissant in Victorian linen. Morning hasn't arrived. The sky through the curtains remains the color of unwashed slate, and the air holds that early silence, thicker than usual, like the whole world is holding its breath alongside you. There's a peculiar logic in the dark hours before dawn. A rhythm that makes you aware of your heartbeat, of how loud a blanket can sound when it shifts, of how Victorian insomnia wasn't just sleeplessness. It was a ritualized, social, and sometimes even moral crisis. After all, restlessness could be a sign of sin. Or at the very least, indigestion. You try to relax again, but your stomach has other ideas. It growls. Not a loud growl, a sort of melancholic moan, the kind a ghost might make if it had once been a baker. In the Victorian age, the late-night snack wasn't frowned upon. In fact, it was prescribed. A biscuit and a small glass of warm wine. Or for the more spiritually inclined, beef tea. Yes, you heard right, beef tea. A fringe favorite, beef tea was made by boiling down beef in water for hours until it became a protein-rich broth. Doctors swore by it. It soothed the nerves, nourished the blood, and allegedly warmed the soul. You imagine sipping beef tea in a porcelain cup, pinky raised, trying not to think about how much it smells like soup for sad people. Historians still argue whether this nighttime nourishment had any real benefit, or was simply a way to keep kitchens busy and minds distracted. Either way, it was ritual. And rituals, especially sleepy, slightly unhinged ones, have always had power. You sit up, listening for signs of movement elsewhere in the house. None. Just the ticking of the clock on the mantel, steady and smug. It's 4:12 a.m. too early for breakfast. Too late for last sleep. The space between. In these hours, Victorians often turned to restful reading. This didn't mean novels, God forbid you stimulate the imagination, but religious tracts, moral essays, or best of all, medical manuals. Some truly unlucky souls even kept copies of Dr. Buchan's Domestic Medicine on their nightstands, a doorstop-sized tome filled with cures, warnings, and descriptions vivid enough to prevent sleep for weeks. You reach for your own version of such a book, well-thumbed, always nearby. You open to a random page and begin reading aloud in a whisper, the way someone might read bedtime stories to themselves just to feel less alone. One ought not to encourage excessive stillness in the blood at bedtime, lest it stagnate in the limbs and cause melancholy of a persistent nature. You blink. How does one unstagnate their blood? The book suggests light stretching and rubbing the calves with rose oil. You briefly consider doing it, then remember you're not made of rose oil or optimism. Instead, you lie back and stretch your arms like a starfish giving up. Victorians were obsessed with balance, of the humors, of the diet, of the soul. Sleeplessness was often seen as a symptom of imbalance. Too much bile. Too little God. Or, occasionally, bad bed posture. Some manuals recommended sleeping slightly upright, propped with multiple pillows, to allow the organs their proper flow. You imagine your liver politely thanking you. One particularly dedicated physician, a Dr. Sylvester Graham, the same man responsible for graham crackers, yes, believed that proper sleep could only be achieved through moral purity, bland food, and daily cold sponge baths. He saw sleep as a spiritual mirror. If your conscience was clear, you'd sleep. If not, well, better enjoy that sponge bath. You glance toward the washbasin in the corner, where a folded towel and a silver pitcher sit expectantly. You decline their judgmental invitation. A soft hum begins to stir in the walls. Maybe it's the pipes, or the wind returning for another pass. Or perhaps it's the house reminding you that soon, dawn will arrive, and with it, the need to look like you slept at all. You lie back, one hand tucked under your cheek, the other resting on the rise of your chest. Your breaths are slow now. Rhythmic. The kind you don't control so much as observe. You imagine yourself floating, not upward but inward. Through memory. Through fabric. through that gentle veil between sleep and story. In the distance, a dog barks once. A cart rolls by, wheels creaking like someone sighing with their whole spine. Somewhere, someone else is waking up for the day, entirely unaware that you never really left it. Victorians sometimes wrote poetry during these hours, nothing grand, usually just snippets. Lines scratched on scraps of paper by candlelight, trying to make sense of this nocturnal purgatory. You think about writing your own line. Sleep is a guest who knocks twice, but always enters when you've stopped listening. Not bad. You close your eyes again, not to force sleep, but to welcome stillness. Maybe sleep will arrive. Maybe not. But for now, you're wrapped in quiet, held by the past, surrounded by the soft absurdities of people who once believed beef tea could heal a broken heart. And who's to say it didn't? You wake again, or rather, rise slightly through the fog of semi-consciousness, aware that your eyes are closed but your mind is no longer tethered to dreams. It's that strange limbo hour when the sky has lightened just enough to sketch the outlines of furniture, but everything remains dipped in grayscale. A chair becomes a looming question mark. A coat rack morphs into a lurking figure until your eyes adjust and you remember you don't even own a coat rack. It's morning. Technically. But the kind that Victorian households greeted with a kind of weary formality, especially if no one had really slept. In homes where insomnia had taken hold, morning didn't bring joy, it brought the performance of normalcy. Rise. Washington, eat porridge. Pretend you weren't lying awake until the coals and the grate turned to ghosts. You shuffle out of bed and stand slowly, letting your limbs remember gravity. In the 1800s, sleep disorders weren't just uncomfortable, they were scandalous. A well-rested person was seen as morally upright, physically robust, and economically efficient. If you weren't sleeping, it must be your fault. You read the wrong books. You let impure thoughts linger. You had too many opinions at dinner. One mainstream belief, especially among the middle and upper classes, was that sleeplessness reflected an overactive brain. And the Victorians, bless them, had many solutions for this, one of which involved a charming little device called the cephaloelectrometer. Think of it as an early tinfoil hat but with wires and promises. It claimed to balance the electric energy of your scalp to calm your mind. In practice, it made you look like a poorly disguised teapot. Historians still argue whether this was pseudoscience, sincere effort, or just the byproduct of having too much money and not enough sense. You imagine donning one now. Sitting quietly in your living room as copper wires lightly toast your temples and a loved one reads psalms nearby, hoping the static will scare away the devil, or at least your nightmares. You move to the window. The sky is milky now. Not yet sunlit, but suggestive of it. In Victorian London, dawn meant the beginning of movement, deliveries rattling down cobblestone streets, chimney sweeps shuffling out with blackened brushes, bakers hauling trays of steaming rolls. And in many households, the morning airing began. This was the belief that one must throw open the windows every morning, regardless of season, to let in fresh ether. Never mind that the air might be filled with coal smoke or the smell of horse. What mattered was ritual. You open your own window a crack and feel the bite of dawn against your face. It smells like wet stone and patience. You remember that in this world of rigid bedtime rules and unsleeping nights, one cure reigns supreme among the middle class: hydrotherapy. Ah yes, water. Nature's original sedative. Cold plunges, hot foot baths, alternating temperature compresses. Victorian hydrotherapy clinics looked more like spas designed by slightly unhinged monks. If your insomnia was particularly stubborn, you might be prescribed a drizzle bath, where cool water was dripped onto your forehead for hours. Or the rather bold wet sheet wrap, which involved being mummified in cold, damp linens and left to soak in tranquility. You head toward your bathroom now, not for anything so dramatic, but just to splash your face. The cold water jolts your skin awake, but behind your eyes, the fatigue lingers, like wallpaper that won't quite peel off. A soft creak behind you. Just the house settling. You tell yourself that twice. Victorian architecture has a way of sounding sentient at this hour. But these houses weren't just structures. They were stages for performance. You had to look like you slept well, even if you didn't. Puffy eyes? Bathe them with rosewater. Pale cheeks? Pinch them or dab them with beet juice. One physician even recommended briskly brushing your face with a soft hairbrush to restore the color of proper health. You tried to picture yourself doing that now, vigorously scrubbing like a Victorian chimney, but quickly opt for a towel instead. In wealthier homes, there might be a servant or housemaid discreetly asking whether you'd slept well, as if this were a casual curiosity and not a test of virtue. The correct answer, of course, was always yes. To admit otherwise was to risk being seen as anxious, unstable, or worst of all, French. You step back into the bedroom and begin the slow ritual of dressing. In the 19th century, dressing was an event, even for the sleepless. Corsets, waistcoats, cravats, layers upon layers, each fold a signal of control, each button a tiny victory over chaos. You, too, layer on your day with deliberate gestures. Shirt. Sweater. That one hoodie that's basically a security blanket in disguise. Still no birdsong outside, just the soft groan of a city that isn't quite ready. You sit on the edge of the bed and glance at the clock again. 6:01 a.m. You made it through the night. Sort of. For many Victorians, this moment was marked with a soft bell or chime. Morning prayers. Or, if you lived near a church, the subtle clang of early Mass. Those who couldn't sleep were advised to attend, a way to cleanse the soul and bore the body into submission. Even now, the idea of sitting on a wooden pew in silence has a certain appeal. A cold bench. A drone of organ music. The weight of someone else's words wrapping around you like wool. But you're not going anywhere. Not just yet. You lie back down, not to sleep, but to give your body one last chance to pretend. You imagine being in a London clinic, tucked into a hard cot after a hot mustard foot soak. The air smells faintly of eucalyptus and starch. A nurse with the emotional range of a shovel gently places a compress on your forehead and whispers, "Try not to think." As if that were ever the issue. And somehow, that absurdity soothes you. You breathe in deeply. The sky is shifting now, a blush of rose sneaking through the window cracks. The day is beginning. And even if you didn't conquer sleep, you've survived the night. Like thousands before you, reading tracts, sipping beef tea, wrapped in wet linens and wondering if they'd ever truly rest. You close your eyes. Maybe not to sleep, but to be still. To honor the quiet. To thank your body for getting through it all, wired, wide-eyed, and strangely victorious. You open your eyes, not because you want to, but because the light insists. It's bolder now, slipping through the curtain seem like an overconfident guest. The room is no longer mysterious. It's just beige. A little crumpled. And filled with the faint scent of laundry detergent and forgotten dreams. Somewhere in the building, a kettle begins to whistle. Your stomach perks up like a hopeful puppy. And you remember, Victorian breakfasts weren't about indulgence. They were about structure. You couldn't be trusted to sleep properly, so at least you'd eat properly. A regimented start to a life where the night had once again refused to perform its single job. As you shuffle toward the kitchen, you think about how the Victorians classified sleep problems. They didn't just say, insomnia, the way we do now. Oh no. They had types. There was agrepnia, the complete loss of sleep, often blamed on grief, madness, or too much mutton. There was watchfulness, a lighter, anxious state often linked to women. And then there was delirious sleeplessness, which, if that isn't a name for a rock band, should be. Historians still argue whether these categories helped anyone or simply gave insomnia a fancier vocabulary with which to despair. You settle into a chair and sip something warm. Not beef tea, not today, but perhaps chamomile or a sleepy blend you picked up on a hopeful Tuesday. As the steam curls upward, you imagine a Victorian apothecary preparing his own concoctions. The herbalist shelves were an insomnia battleground, stacked with glass jars labeled in looping script, valerian root, skullcap, hops, mandrake. Yes, mandrake, the same stuff that screamed in Harry Potter. These herbal sleep aids weren't just medicine. They were stories in a bottle. People believed in the spirit of the plant, in the soul-calming essence extracted from each petal and root. Never mind that some of them were mild hallucinogens. You weren't just trying to sleep, you were courting sleep, wooing it like a reluctant lover who only visits when you stop checking the clock. You smile faintly, remembering the old Victorian practice of stuffing lavender and chamomile into tiny embroidered sleep pillows. These sachets were tucked under actual pillows, meant to lull you with scent. Of course, not all sleep remedies were so gentle. One cure involved smoking opium in a long pipe while listening to quiet music. Another suggested rubbing laudanum, an opium tincture, on the gums. You glance at your modern mug of tea and feel a little boring by comparison. But also, blessedly alive. The teacup warms your fingers. It's still early, but now there's movement outside. The sound of footsteps. Car doors. A scooter whining down the street like a toddler in meltdown. You're awake. They're awake. Maybe the whole world is just gently faking it until caffeine kicks in. And now your mind wanders, back to the bedchamber, to one of the more curious chapters of Victorian sleep culture, the separation of beds. This was the era when many couples stopped sleeping in the same bed, not out of marital trouble, but because sleep was sacred. If your partner snored, twitched, or even breathed inconsistently, they were interfering with your health. And so, the invention of the his and hers bedroom was born. You imagine the setup now. 2 neatly made beds, side by side or in entirely different rooms. A little bell perhaps, or a polite knock if one wished to visit the other. But once the night came, it was each person for themselves. One particularly meticulous household in Surrey recorded their sleep logs in a shared ledger. Every morning, each spouse would rate their sleep quality from 1 to 5 and note any disturbances. It's unclear whether this promoted harmony or just passive-aggressive scoring, but you have to admire the effort. You look down at your phone now, wondering what you'd score last night. A 2? A generous 3? But then again, the Victorian scale didn't have a category for. Mentally hosted an entire fake interview on a podcast that doesn't exist. Breakfast in this age might have included kippers, eggs, porridge, and, if you were lucky, a side of optimism. You keep things simpler. A slice of toast. Maybe jam. You're not aiming for nourishment. You're just trying to fool your body into thinking it's ready. And all the while, the faint echoes of sleepless nights throughout history hum quietly in your bones. This isn't new. This isn't even unusual. It's an inheritance. Generations of midnight readers, tea drinkers, pillow punchers, and dawn pacers, all trying to outwit the mystery of sleep. You rinse your cup, the warm water running over your fingers in a slow stream. And for a second, you imagine yourself back in one of those Victorian hydrotherapy clinics, not wrapped in wet sheets this time, but standing under a contraption known as the Scottish douche, a rotating blast of hot and cold water designed to reset the nerves. Sounds like a punishment invented by a very disappointed uncle. But again, there's something almost soothing in the effort. The idea that people, flawed, anxious, achingly human, tried so hard to make sleep a science, a craft, a devotion, that they believed in the power of lavender and bedtime psalms, that they built entire careers on diagnosing the invisible. And maybe, just maybe, they were onto something. You carry your empty cup back to the sink. Outside, the sun is climbing. The world is louder now. But a softness still clings to the air, a lingering trace of the hours when nothing was expected of you. No smiles. No meetings. Just the quiet rebellion of not sleeping and surviving it anyway. You sit for a moment longer, your body gently humming with fatigue and resolve. Today may be filled with yawns. Maybe even a nap. But right now you are awake, and the night is behind you. Barely. Beautifully. And almost convincingly. You leave the kitchen behind and wander through your space with that strange post-insomnia float, half-dream, half-dutiful alertness. It's like walking through a memory of someone else's morning, wearing borrowed socks. Each step feels soft and a little absurd. Victorians would have approved of this kind of listlessness, at least temporarily. After all, the body had suffered. One poor night's sleep wasn't a moral failing, it was a temporary derangement. The solution? Tonic culture. Yes, in an era that worshipped poise, propriety, and polished furniture, the tonic was a magical fix-all. It was liquid bravery, hope in a bottle. You imagined shelves lined with brown glass apothecary bottles, each with a label more promising than the last. Nervine elixir, Dr. Browning's sleep syrup, Mother Winslow's soothing cordial. These weren't drinks. They were performances, bittersweet plays starring alcohol, opium, and vague herbal extracts. One mainstream fact, many of these tonics were over-the-counter and wildly popular. The 1870s even saw full-page newspaper ads swearing that a few spoonfuls of bromidia would rock you to sleep like an angel in a rocking chair. It was about trust. Trust in science. Trust in labels. Trust that, if you just believed hard enough, the bottle might actually fix you. You picture a Victorian insomniac sitting by candlelight, cradling a tonic glass in trembling hands. The flame flickers. The syrup smells of anise and crushed petals. They close their eyes, tip it back, and hope this night, at least, will melt into forgetfulness. Historians still argue whether these early tonics genuinely soothed or simply drugged the restless into compliance. But either way, people believed in them with a kind of quiet, desperate faith. You make your way to your reading nook. Maybe it's a comfy chair, maybe just a corner of the couch with a blanket and a lamp. Either way, it's your little retreat. A place to sit and be, without the requirement of full cognition. You reach for a book, something old, something with pages that whisper as you turn them. Fiction, probably. Even Victorian doctors recommend it. Light reading, for the sleepless. Not too exciting. No politics. No philosophy. Just gentle tales, pastoral settings, or maybe a detective story where the crime is solved in time for tea. Reading was considered medicinal. A way to soothe the nerves, as they like to say. But it came with warnings, too. Overstimulating novels, especially for women, were believed to cause insomnia, hysteria, and in rare cases, spontaneous feminism. The horror. You smile at the thought, thumbing through the pages as the morning light grows stronger. Your eyes scan the lines, but you're not really absorbing the story. You're riding the rhythm of the words, the soft thud of plot-like footsteps leading you somewhere safe. But not everyone in the 1800s had the luxury of tonics or books. For the working class, insomnia wasn't treated, it was tolerated. If you couldn't sleep, you still rose before dawn to scrub, sew, or shovel. Some resorted to remedies passed down through generations, onion poultices on the soles of the feet, warm ale with nutmeg, or the timeless advice to walk it off until you forget what you were so worried about. One fringe belief you find strangely charming, the use of sleep stones. Some Victorians swore that placing a smooth, cold stone, usually quartz or obsidian, under the pillow could draw nightmares out through the skull. They didn't know how, of course. It was simply believed. And belief, as you've come to realize, was half the battle. You glance toward your pillow now, half tempted to dig through a drawer for something suitably mystical. Maybe that weird rock you picked up on a beach once. Maybe a chunk of amethyst someone gave you when you were into crystals for a weekend. Because what is insomnia, really, if not a ritual? A nightly parade of attempts. The fan turned just so. The blanket weighted just right. A specific pillow, a specific silence. All of it choreography for a dance your brain refuses to learn. You think of the Victorians again. Of the woman in Wiltshire who believed the only true sleep came from lying exactly north to south, aligned with magnetic currents. Or the doctor in Manchester who recommended placing a slice of apple on the tongue and holding it there without chewing, to lull the body by way of fruit. You're not sure whether to laugh or admire the inventiveness. Probably both. Outside, the noise is louder now. Not yet chaos, but the beginning of it. The distant hum of traffic. Someone dragging a trash bin with the enthusiasm of a bored elephant. A dog barking like it's personal. You set the book down. Not because you're done, but because your body is reminding you, gently, that you're still tired. Still not quite rooted in the day. You move to the window and let the sunlight hit your face. It's soft, almost shy. A golden apology for the sleepless night before. And you think about the Victorian sleep diary again. The careful notations. The temperature of the room. What was eaten. When the last thought crossed the mind. Some entries were heartbreakingly precise. Slept 3 hours total. Dreamt of father. Woke at 2:17. Remained restless. Prayed. Took wine. Even then, people craved understanding. They wanted to pin down sleep like a butterfly. Examine it. Fix it. But sleep, maddeningly, resists being studied. The more you watch it, the further it drifts. You blink against the sunlight and allow yourself a slow breath. You've made it this far. Through herbs and tonics, whispers and stones. Through books and candles and thoughts that wouldn't stop talking. And now you are here. In this moment. Upright. Still tired, yes, but carried forward by some strange Victorian echo of resilience. You decide not to fight the day. Not to fake wakefulness. But to move gently through it, the way sleep should move through you. A pact: if tonight is restless again, you will not panic. You will not scold your body. You will remember that entire centuries have passed full of people just like you, sleepless, curious, half hoping for a miracle, and finding instead small comforts in warm tea and odd little cures. You leave the window and return to your chair, wrapping yourself in a blanket that smells faintly of drier sheets, and maybe lavender if you squint your nose just right. And as the day opens its eyes wide, you give yourself permission to keep yours half closed. You sink deeper into the blanket, cocoon now. Not exactly asleep, not exactly awake. Just riding the soft blur between moments, like a Victorian ghost politely haunting your own apartment. And then you remember the sleep lectures. Yes, in the 19th century, if you were wealthy and unlucky enough to suffer insomnia, you might be advised to attend a lecture on sleep hygiene. These weren't TED Talks. They were long, droning sessions about the correct alignment of the spine, the perils of late-night digestion, and the spiritual dangers of too much moonlight. Some took notes. Some nodded off. Some quietly plotted their escape. You shift slightly in your chair, imagining the lecture hall, gas lamps flickering, rows of exhausted men in high collars and women in corsets trying not to yawn too loudly. The speaker taps a long pointer against the chalkboard. Diagrams of the brain, the stomach, the nervous ether. And somewhere in the back, someone dreams of their bed, sweet and impossibly distant. Historians still argue whether these lectures offered real guidance, or merely lulled people into sleep via boredom. But their existence alone says something remarkable. People were beginning to treat sleep as a science. Not just a failure of the will or a punishment from God, but a system that could be studied, adjusted, even hacked. And so, the Victorians did what they always did. They took a mystery and tried to smother it in etiquette and education. If sleep was elusive, perhaps it could at least be manners-ed into submission. You glance at your phone and, for once, resist the urge to check anything. No messages. No news. Just the glow of the screen reflecting your still tired eyes. The modern lecture hall, it seems, fits in your pocket. But your thoughts are already drifting to one of the stranger Victorian ideas, the importance of air. Proper ventilation was seen as vital for sleep. Windows were to be cracked, no matter the season. Curtains should be pulled back just enough to let the air circulate with dignity. There were even contraptions, tiny wind turbines, almost like indoor weather vanes, placed in the bedroom to keep the air moving while maintaining decorum. Some households swore by the power of night air, going so far as to sleep in garden beds. Imagine it, wrought iron bedsteads pushed onto porches, or actual mattresses laid out under pergolas, all in pursuit of what was called air bathing. You'd lie there under a wool blanket and stare at the stars while the night did its mysterious work. And of course, you had to breathe correctly. One popular guidebook recommended inhaling deeply and exhaling with a polite whistle, as if cooling tea. This was considered ideal for relaxing the diaphragm and warding off nightmares. Because, as everyone knew, nightmares entered through shallow breath. You think about your own breathing now. Not quite shallow, but definitely not tea cooling. You inhale, letting the air in slowly, then let it go with a sigh that's more sleepy than strategic. Still, it feels good. Like you're playing along with some invisible rulebook. And just as your eyes begin to flutter closed again, your stomach betrays you, with a soft growl that feels louder than any foghorn. You suppose it's time for second breakfast, or maybe just a snack. Something cozy. Victorian insomniacs often turn to warm milk, stirred gently with sugar and cinnamon. Or a slice of buttered toast dipped in tea. Food, after all, was medicine in its most delicious form. One oddly enduring fringe cure involved a spoonful of cod liver oil just before bed, or in the morning, if sleep had failed. The logic was unclear, but the ritual persisted. Rich in fat and heavy on the guilt, cod liver oil was believed to weigh down the spirit, encouraging rest. You can't help but picture a child making faces, nose pinched, while a stern governess insists, "It's for your nerves, dear." You opt for something more palatable. Maybe toast. Maybe a banana. You're not trying to solve sleep now, you're just patching the holes it left behind. Back in your chair, you nibble slowly, feeling oddly aligned with those long-gone night walkers and tea drinkers. This strange club of people who learn to live around sleep, not with it. Your mind wanders again, this time to the bizarre invention of the insomnia chair. Yes, it was real. A patented design. Part recliner, part restraint system, the insomnia chair was supposed to support your body just enough to let you doze, but not enough to fall into dangerous slumber. It was recommended for those whose doctors believed traditional sleep would unmoor the mind. So instead, you'd be strapped in, half upright, in a gently padded prison of good intentions. You picture yourself in one of those chairs now. Slightly upright. Velvety upholstery. Possibly embroidered. A soft ticking clock nearby. And a physician in mutton-chopped sideburns reminding you not to relax too hard. You think better of it. Because as much as the Victorians tried to engineer rest, there's something timeless about the stubbornness of the sleepless brain. You can't force it. You can only tempt it, like a shy animal. With soft sounds. Dim lights. A full belly and an empty calendar. That's the trick, really. Not chasing sleep, but clearing a space for it to arrive. Like setting a place at the table for someone who may or may not show up. You do it anyway, because hope is also part of the cure. And speaking of places, another Victorian oddity comes to mind, the travel cure. For those whose insomnia was tied to melancholy or urban overstimulation, a doctor might prescribe travel. Not for leisure, but for the sake of moving your sleep shadow to new soil. A week in the country. A train ride to Bath. A slow steamer to the coast. The idea was that new scenery would interrupt bad sleep patterns, like shaking a snow globe and hoping the flakes settle somewhere else. Historians still argue whether this worked or just postponed the problem. But either way, it was another example of how far people were willing to go, geographically and financially, to find peace in a pillow. You stretch again, blanket falling slightly. Your body hums with a fatigue that's not quite unpleasant. Like you've reached the edge of your own restlessness and found, not sleep, but softness. That counts too. And somewhere, in the gentle chambers of your own mind, you picture those outdoor beds under starlit trellises, tonic bottles clinking in pockets, and dainty porcelain cups filled with milky tea and a prayer. You're not alone. Not in this. Not in the long tradition of staring at the ceiling, of rewriting the night with warm spoons and wild theories. You belong to a lineage of sleepy rebels. Insomniac romantics. Dreamers without dreams. You pull the blanket tighter. And breathe.